Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 15th, 2024 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. I am Joanne Crowley, Chair. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, paragraphs 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations signed into law on June 16th, 2021, the Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a joint public hearing and a public meeting on May 15th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. The public is welcome to attend in person this evening or via alternative public access provided in the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. I'd like to begin by taking roll call. Susan Britta.
Here.
Will Rubenstein.
Here.
Jim Sabin.
Here.
Peter Slovak.
Here.
Ken Smith. Chris Vincent.
Here.
Joanne Crowley, present. Seeing that we have a quorum present, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I would ask that you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate your attendance. This is a joint public hearing with the Planning Board and the Tree Warden. As these things go, the rules and regulations require that on a scenic road, if we are to prune or take down a tree, it needs a public hearing, and so that is the purpose of the meeting tonight. Following the protocol for public hearings, I would first like to read into the public record the joint public hearing notice that was published in the Cape Cod Times on April 30th and May 7th. I apologize, it has all the gory details, but it is a requirement. Published in the Cape Cod Times on April 30th and May 7th, and distributed to abutters within 100 feet of the proposed action. Joint public hearing notice, Yarmouth Planning Board and the Yarmouth Tree Warden. In accordance with the scenic road provisions of Chapter 40, Section 15C, and the public shade provisions of Chapter 87, Section 3 of Massachusetts General Laws, the Yarmouth Planning Board and the Yarmouth Tree Warden will hold a joint public hearing on Wednesday, May 15th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the hearing room of the Yarmouth Town Offices, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass. 02664. And via remote access and telephone to consider a scenic roadway permit application submitted by the Yarmouth Public Works Department to remove 10 trees located within the Old Main Street Road right-of-way, including a 24-inch ash tree located in front of 112-116 Old Main, a 24-inch ash tree in front of 134 Old Main, a 24-inch ash tree in front of 162 Old Main, a 24-inch ash tree in front of 172 Old Main, a 20-inch ash tree in front of 176 Old Main Street, a 24-inch maple tree in front of 190-196 Old Main, an 18-inch ash tree in front of 264-270 Old Main Street, a 20-inch ash tree in front of 280 Old Main Street, a 24-plus-inch maple tree in front of 290 Old Main Street, and a 20-inch ash tree in front of 294 Old Main Street. All tree sizes are approximate. Old Main Street is a scenic road in South Yarmouth. Copies of the application are available at the Planning Department, Yarmouth Town offices during the business hours 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Any person wishing to be heard on this matter should appear at the time and place designated above. Written comments will be accepted and should be directed to the Planning Board at the Yarmouth Town offices at the address noted above or care of Kathy Williams, our town planner, at kwilliams@yarmouth.ma.us, no later than May 14th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Signed by Yarmouth Planning Board Chair Joanne Crowley and the Yarmouth Tree Warden Michael White. Following this particular protocol on a public hearing, the order of the meeting will be as follows. Our DPW Director, Jeff Colby, will give a presentation with Michael White, our tree warden. We will then ask for any public comments or questions. Kathy has received some written comments. We will summarize those for you. We will then have the planning board ask any questions or have any comments at that time. We will then close the public hearing, and then we will follow that with our deliberations on this particular application. I'd like to remind everyone to please use the microphone there and to identify yourself by your name and address. So I'd like to invite Jeff Colby, our Director of Public Works, and Michael White, our tree warden, to join us and walk through the application that they have presented this evening.
Hey. Thank you very much. Jeff Colby, DPW Director. I'm joined by Mike White, our tree warden. I also want to mention that we have Jordan Young from Eversource here as well that'll be available to answer some questions, and Mike Donovan from Robert Auer, who's doing the sewer work along the stretch of Old Main Street, would be available for questions or comments as they might come up. I really appreciate your time this evening. This is a difficult item in that these are some fairly large mature trees, but there is a concern with the construction equipment that's putting the sewer in along Old Main Street. It's a fairly large sewer main, 30 inches in diameter. It's a major connector for, as we call it, the backbone of the wastewater system. And so there's some fairly deep depths in which the pipes needs to be installed as well, and large construction equipment to do that. But with that said, I want to actually turn it over to Michael White to kind of talk about each one of the trees and his take on those, as well as the impacts from the trimming that would need to be done in order to get the construction equipment in there. So, Mike, if you want to talk about that.
I had a site visit with the contractor that will be doing the excavation work for the sewer project, and they had expressed that we needed certain clearances for the whole entire road for the project to be able to accommodate the equipment that would be used, swing radiuses and trucks that would need to be loaded. Most of that clearance can be maintained with light pruning on the whole road, which falls under the guidelines of the 3-inch, I believe, is the maximum on a scenic road. But there are several, the 10 trees that I did select, that in order to prune for proper clearance, you'd take so much of the existing tree away that you would more than likely cause future mortality. The trees have all been heavily overhead pruned over the years, which has made kind of an odd shape, as most know that look of a tree going out over the road and out over a
Kathy's
property.
got some.
That's a great example. So in order to maintain the clearance needed, you would need to take most of the branches coming out over the traveling lane, which would then leave basically 50% of a tree. And what would be left existing would be things over top of private property. So if there was future failure, you'd be worried about failure on private property, not just on roads as well. To get the clearance needed, there's no way around that you would need to make very large cuts on these trees. And ashes in particular and Norway maples do not rebound well from heavy pruning. In that way, they don't compartmentalize well, and it incites lots of decay, which lots of these trees already have from overhead pruning, so you're just going to add to that. So that my recommendation for removal is based on that there's really no better way around the clearance with pruning other than removal.
Okay, any other comments? I'm curious, this timetable, maybe you can walk us through a timetable of some sort?
Certainly. I think a couple of comments I'd like to make, and timing is certainly important, is with regards to the sewer construction that's happening now. Right now it's happening along Route 28, but that will be stopping shortly after Memorial Day for the season. But work will progress along Old Main Street at that time, throughout the summer season. So there will be work that's happening along Old Main Street as early as the middle of June. I think Mike Donovan from Robert Hour could comment a little bit more on the specifics if the exact dates and weeks are important. But that is the rough schedule. So it's not something that's, a year in the future or, in the fall. It's something that will be happening this summer season. The other item that I mentioned, it's in the application, but we didn't, mention it this evening, is that we will be replacing the trees one for one. So each one of those trees that comes out, we'll be putting in another tree. Maybe not in that exact location because it is a very difficult location. As you can see, this is a great example in the picture. It's really just a couple of feet between the edge of the road and a paved sidewalk. Probably not a good environment for a tree. Michael could comment on that,
I would
but
maybe
there's probably better
speak further to that,
locations for those for the survivability of the trees in the future. And the other thing I'd ask Michael to comment on is the species of tree. Some of these are actually considered invasive.
Yes, so not the ashes, but the Norway maples are on the Massachusetts invasive species list now anyway, so those wouldn't be replaced with the same species. And a lot of the species on my example list that I did provide for Public Works there's a few natives, there's a few hybrids, and also there's actually a particular list that Eversource has called the 30 under 30 list. So if there was anyone who really, really was headstrong about wanting to keep their replacement tree in the same area, these trees don't grow more than 30 feet tall. So if you were to replace back in that same area, we wouldn't have to worry about overhead lines, which would mean we wouldn't have to worry about aggressive pruning in the future, which would prolong the life of the tree. So there's that possibility. I also put in Persian ironwood, I believe, is on the 30 under 30, but a red maple, the Acer rubrum, that's a native tree. A lot of people are very into the replacing with native species now, and that's great, but also there's a lot of cultivars and a lot of other tree species that are very, very good and resilient along roadsides. And in my experience, the black tupelo does very, very well along roadsides. Sweet gum does very well along roadsides. They have good tolerances with salt. They have good tolerances with not amazing soil conditions, which is, the side of a road is usually not ideal tree planting area.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to present before we open it up for public question and comment? Kathy, did you want to run through your planner memo for us?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest. I think they've given a pretty good description of the proposed work that they're doing and how they're going to be doing some restoration by replacing the trees. We did receive some comments. The police chief did provide a comment. He indicated no objections to the project. We did meet with the Historical Commission on May 9th, and although they understood the need to remove the trees, they did request that we get in touch with the Cultural Center to see if the Cape Cod Woodturners would be interested in using the salvaged wood. So we have reached out to them, and they are going to be checking with them. It would be great if we could actually reuse the wood in some fashion, have something nice made out of it. We also received a recent letter today, and you have it right there, an email from Brittany D. Rienzo, the Conservation Administrator from the Conservation Commission, saying that they would prefer the use of native trees to be planted instead of, she did identify that the Persian ironwood and the London plane, I believe, are invasive.
They're not
Non-native.
They're the ones that are not,
Yeah,
okay.
they're
This would
non-native.
exclude Persian ironwood and London plane from the list of 5 species proposed for replacement. And then we did receive an email from Larry and Sue, and I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce their names, Pelea. They expressed some concerns initially about removing the trees and how long it takes for a tree to grow and how easy it is to cut it down. I don't know if they're here this evening, but I did provide some additional information to them, and ultimately they appreciated having the additional information as to the reason why and that we were going to be replacing one-to-one, and then did indicate that the tree in front of the Simpkins property looks dead anyway. Just concerned about how we got tree chopping crazy sometimes. I think this is a little bit a different scenario here. And that it takes 1 day to chop down a tree and then 20 years to regrow it. They also did note that ashes are particularly weak as well. And then just to talk about the process really quickly. As Joanne mentioned, that any tree limb or tree located within a scenic road that's 4 inches in diameter or greater needs to have a public hearing. and this is a joint hearing with the tree warden and the planning board. The decision of the planning board is based on consideration of the following 7 criteria, which is preservation of natural resources, environmental values, historical values, scenic and aesthetic characteristics, public safety, compensatory actions proposed such as replacement of trees or stone walls, other sound planning considerations, and an affirmative vote of 5 members of the planning board is required to authorize these removals.
Okay. So I'd like to open it up now to public comment. If you could raise your hand and come to the podium. Name and address, please.
Can everyone hear me? I'm Curtis Fleming. I live at 112 Old Main Street. I've been there 5 years, owned the house for two years. When I got the letter about the trees, I was super excited because I have a big tree right in front of my house, and I'm very excited to see that go. One thing, though, that popped up after I saw the letter, though, is I have 3 little kids. I have a 6-year-old, 2-year-old, and 1.5-year-old. 2 of my pets have been killed by cars in front of my house. There is data that suggests canopy of trees over roads reduces speed on roads. How are we going to think about reducing speeds, considering it's already a road that people fly down as a cut through off of 228? Has that been thought about?
Jeff, if you want to try to tackle that one, it sounds more like an speed enforcement issue, but...
It is a speed enforcement issue, but I can tell you that our town engineer, Amanda Lima, has been giving a lot of thought to this and has some thoughts about different road features that maybe could help reduce speeds, and certainly replacing the trees, I think, will help as well. In the future, once the sewer construction's done and we replace the trees, there will be trees, back along the road that I think will address, in the same manner that you're talking about, there will be vegetation there. But Amanda has spent some time looking at other options with regards to the speeds. I don't think we're prepared to present anything tonight as to what that might look like, but it is something we are considering because it is a concern in that area.
Okay. Yeah, and I think one thing, too, the main tree that would be taken down in front of my house is a natural barrier for cars. Hate to say it, they fly down the road, they would hit that tree before they ran into my house and take out my kid's bedroom. So it's something that is a concern to me. I'm all for taking down the trees as long as there is a pathway to reduce the speed on the road overall. That's all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Otto Danner. I live on River Street, 187 River Street. I had a couple of questions. One is, you keep talking about 1 for 1, but in reality, it's not 1 for 1, right? You're taking down a 50, 60-foot tree and you're replacing it with what? 10-foot tree?
What size?
How big is it going to be? I don't know. But you haven't said. So that's just one thing I'm thinking about.
So
The other
your
thing-
question, sir, is about the caliper of the tree? What's the size of the tree?
Oh, the
That
size.
might be the replacement?
You're replacing a 50 or 60-foot tree with something much less than what it is, right?
They would have to, yes.
It's not a 1 for 1, is what I'm saying. The other thing is, if you go down Main Street today, you look at these pictures. I mean, I go down Main Street regularly. This is not a scenic road anymore with those trees like that, right? In my opinion, that's not a scenic road. When you drive down the road and you look at this tree, is that a scenic road? No, not in my opinion. I don't think other people would agree with me. I think that's the main things I had to talk about. But I just, the other question is, have we decided on what tree you're going to put in? You give a list, but have we decided what tree we're going to put in?
So I'd like to speak to that. So the reason that there's a list and that there's a variety of species is because there hasn't been particular replacement sites chosen yet based on road layout, speaking to residents who would have trees put in front of their houses. There's a lot that would need to be done to find particular exact replacement sites, and upon finding those sites, that would then determine what species tree would go into that site based on soil conditions, drainage, sunlight, all kinds of different variables. And so because of that, I couldn't particularly say to replace this one ash here, we would then want this species here. I would like to have, once those construction's done and we can actually see the final road layout of what things will look like when the road's repaired, then it'll be a better time to discuss where things will get replaced and what species will be there.
And the size, have you decided on the size?
Typically, roadside planting trees are a 3 to 4 inch caliper tree. That's, something that maybe would be 8 to 12 feet in height.
I guess the last thing is, the concern is 30 years from now, is that tree going to be pruned like this tree is here?
Well, that's the purpose of why we're talking about doing this, is that we can actually relocate where, there's no reason to plant a tree that's going to be 80 feet tall underneath of a 40-foot tall power line. And that's why we have this. And that's what robs the scenic road of that scenic view. So if we have the ability now that we're going to come through and plant a lot of trees, we can plant them on the opposite side of the road where there's no overhead wires and there's plenty of space for trees to grow. And we can put in some nice big specimen species that will actually look far better than this when my children drive down the road.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's one more thing I'd like to add with regard to the species and selection. Our town engineer has also indicated that there's an overlap with some drainage improvements that are being planned for along this road in at least 5 of the locations where trees are anticipated to go back. So we'd really like to do a rain garden type of treatment where the tree would complement that particular scenario in those particular cases. So some of that is still being worked through.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Okay, I'd like to turn to the board now. We can start with Peter.
The sidewalks will be repaired, I would imagine, if grinding down the stump, either replacing whatever needs to be replaced, but leveling the sidewalk.
Absolutely, and that's actually been the case in my time here. There's been, I think, one other tree that was dead, considered hazardous, needed to be removed. When that was removed, we were able to fix the sidewalk. So to your point, in many cases, the sidewalks are mounded around the trees or near the trees, and that will be fixed as part of this, absolutely.
All the houses along Old Main Street have to connect to the sewer. They're going to all be connected. So if everyone's stubbed, every homeowner going to be going through the sidewalk to connect? Cutting in?
So the stubs would typically be left on the property side, or terminated on the property side of the sidewalk. So that would be taken care of as part of the main installation, and then people would be able to connect to that stub on the other side of the sidewalk, their side of the sidewalk.
Thank you.
Mr. Rubenstein.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, both of you, for giving a little more context. I have a question about timing. You mentioned that if this does get approved, these trees would be removed, let's say, in the next 60 days. I'm using rough numbers, so sooner rather than later. Can you give a sense of how much longer the sewer project is going to keep going in this area for the residents, certainly that are being affected? And then how does that connect to a timetable for replacement?
Those are good questions. I will answer the parts that I can comfortably answer. I might defer some of that to Mike Donovan from Robert B. Auer with regard to their progress and what they could reasonably make along Old Main Street. But we have a contract for the sewer installation in this area with Robert B. Auer that goes until September of 2026. And it wouldn't be till the completion of the sewer work that we'd be installing the trees. And that is anticipated if they finish their work early. It could happen sooner, but they do have that amount of time available to them in the contract to complete the sewer work. Hopefully that answers most of your question.
I think it does. I just wanted to, if there are more residents here than those that chose to speak, I just wanted them to hear what the timetable was going to be so that it wasn't just as simple as, well, that's great that the trees are unfortunately leaving soon, but when are they coming back, no matter what the size and the width are. I guess when we get towards a motion, Madam Chair, about the timetable about replacement is where I may have some concerns about adding on a lot more time. But obviously we have to respect the fact that this is also part of a large project, a phase of a large project. But at the same time, we also, and I'm sure the tree warden is literally the mechanism to enforce this, as are we, have to make sure there's some accountability so that, we all have this wonderful meeting. It's May of 2024. And, then what? I guess that's sort of where my head has gone. And, I do also sympathize for for the residents that unfortunately are going to be losing trees in front of their houses, regardless of the fact of whether aesthetically we think they're pleasing or not. It kind of stinks. And that's why I'm concerned about the timing, because I want to, as when we get these kinds of applications, I think about, well, what if it was my street? And those are the kinds of things that come to mind. And also, I just want to make sure I heard this right. It sounds like that you will have the ability, or the intention, I should say, of meeting with each individual homeowner at each individual address as listed in the application about the location and the type of tree. Is that what I heard?
Not entirely. No,
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to, you mentioned something about it which sounded good, but I just want to make sure that that's.
I can elaborate more on that.
please.
So
Thanks.
the idea is that upon construction being completed,
Right.
and we can go back now to this new open streetscape where we can actually go out and select proper good sites for replanting. I'm going to look at the street as a blank canvas for replanting, and where I find very good ideal sites for replanting, if it falls in line with in front of a resident's home, I would meet with that resident and talk to them. Obviously, that said, if any of the residents who are losing trees in front of their house wanted to, meet about a replacement tree, I would be more than happy to meet with them. It cannot go back in I like to call it the devil strip, because that is not an ideal planting site for any tree in
I
the
get
world.
that.
But we can also use part of Chapter 87. There's a setback protocol that I'd have to dive more into, but it's part of Chapter 87 where you can make an agreement between the town and the resident where there's a 2 or 3 year responsibility of the tree being planted set back out of the town right-of-way into the resident's yard, and then that resident eventually, after 2 to 3 years, would assume responsibility of that tree and have a replacement tree that we could have further back, at least from the lines, closer to their house.
Got it. All right, so that was helpful. So what I heard was we're not going to be replanting on the same side of where the trees are being eliminated, because that's counteractive.
Yes.
Okay, but the second thing is, if I can just flash forward to fall of 2026, and the good Lord willing, and the creek doesn't rise, that this part of the project is over. So you're a nice resident that lives in this area. I don't know, because this is, even though it's been almost 4 years on the planning board, this is the first time I've met you and heard about what you do. I knew you existed, but I just never met you. I guess what I'm wondering is, what's the mechanism for the residents when they wake up on October 1st, 2026, and there is this streetscape that you describe? What's the mechanism for them to know what you're thinking, and what's the process for you to educate not just the folks on that street, but what other appropriate boards, whether it's conservation or ourselves, about what you intend to do?
That's a public outreach hurdle that we are going to have to overcome. Currently, right now, there's no mechanism for me to speak to residents in the town that I utilize. I've typically been on an as-needed basis to step in on situations pertaining to Chapter 87. This is realistically one of the first actual removal and replacement projects that I've really worked on in the town. So we're going to have to, a little bit of growing pains, but I'm going to have to, work with DPW and with Kathy to come up with a plan on how to have outreach with residents and myself on the replanting.
Well, if I heard you correctly, the news is, I won't say if it's good or not, because I don't live on the street. The news is you've got 2 years, is what it sounds like, to come up with a mechanism to help educate the nice folks who are going to be affected the most by this. So, and Madam Chair, I don't know if this involves the eventual motion we're going to make or not, or whoever the right jurisdiction is, but I would just like to make sure that there is some accountability, not because we don't trust that you're good at your job, but because if this was any of us on our streets, we would like to know that when this process comes to the next phase, that the town is doing the right thing and involving the folks who are the most affected. So again, I'll defer to you, Madam Chair, and the town planner about how we can make sure, since this is a joint hearing, that there is a way for the nice folks, again, when they wake up in October of 2026, they're going to be able to either have some sort of meeting, whether it's public or not, in order to understand what your intentions are, and I know that they're good, but to also involve the residents who are the most affected in the process. I hope that makes sense. Sorry that was a lot of words.
Kathy has suggested some language on condition relating to time.
And we'll get to that, and I've already taken up enough time. I also just wanted to clarify that the gentleman that said before, he's right, it's not one-to-one, meaning you're not going to get a super big tree to replace the super big tree, sir. But it is literally the ratio. And so I understand that the semantics are not fun, because you're never going to get I'd like to imagine what that looks like without a power line there. It probably looks pretty darn good, right? And unfortunately, we're never going to be able to get back to that. But literally, it is one-to-one. I know in some other places, and I wasn't born here, so I've lived in other places. In some other places, they don't know what one-to-one is. So I'm not saying that it's okay that the ultimate replacement might be a 10 or 12-foot tree on the opposite side of the street, but there are places that, let's just say one-to-one would not be their outcome. So I'm at least very happy that there is going to be a one-to-one ratio, even if it's not going to be the same majesty, if you will, of tree. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Britta?
Brittany asked that two of the trees that you've included on your list be deleted. She's not happy with the Persian ironwood or the London plane. So if you take those off and add more samples or more, samples of what you might use, just make sure you coordinate with her so that she is happy with your selections.
Yep.
And then on the one-to-one, do we have to be satisfied with the 3 to 4 inch? Is it possible we could get larger trees?
That would be a massive, massive price difference.
What would be the
We could be talking about $300 to $800 replacement trees, which then you also have to take into account digging and labor and all the time.
I'm not talking.
To put in a
suggesting maybe like the next level up.
The next level up is a big price difference. It's not. You don't go from like a $300 to a $600 tree to like a $800 to a $1,000 tree. Typically you'll see when you go from a 3-inch tree to like a 6 to an 8-inch tree in diameter is when you get into spade equipment, and it's in the thousands per tree. So there's a large cost difference incurred in upping the size of the replacement trees. Most streetscapes are replaced in a 3 to 4 inch tree.
Right. I'm just thinking though, this is a historic street. It's a residential neighborhood. They're losing something that's very precious. So the quicker we get it back to what we view as normal and historic and scenic. But I understand. But if you could just get a general price information, just give it to Kathy so that she can bring it back to the board. I'd just be interested to see what the price differential would be. So just to be clear, so you're taking a tree down in a particular location, but it's not necessarily a replacement trees going back in that location. Is that?
I don't recommend replacing
anything in that strip.
In that strip.
Okay.
You're guaranteeing tree mortality regardless.
Okay.
No matter what, you're going to have tree mortality. The likelihood of establishment is much, much, much lower. The root zone development is very low. I mean, there's every single thing that can be thrown at the tree to stop it from growing is in that little zone. Whereas we can go across the street and, you find these nice 10, 15 foot wide swaths of open area with lots of crown space above them with no wires and.
Right, but I don't want the street to look lopsided with one side of the street and have all the trees and the other side not have enough.
You'll end up with that nice, the purpose of shade tree protection is that nice canopy that comes out over the road.
Correct.
And we have that kind of with these trees. You have like a nice 1-lane thing.
Right, but
Whereas if they were on the other side and you had that nice big vase growing across, you'd have that canopy that could reach out all the way across the road and actually would maintain that shade.
So the canopy doesn't necessarily mean you have to have trees on both sides. You can have tree on one side and.
Ideally, you would like to have them on both sides, but with overhead power lines taking half the canopy out, it's not realistic to be able to, unless trees were further set back and planted more towards the houses, and they could grow up, out, and over top of the power lines, which is the point of what I was talking about earlier with the setback plan, where you can have that, where you can move trees back from the power lines. It's a balance between the power company and the right-of-way to maintain the right canopy.
And you're expecting to do a mix of trees. You'd add some to this list and then.
I'll revise that list now that they don't. That she just isn't happy with having non-natives. I take it. We'll make a new list that's only natives, which will also change. I don't believe there may be 1 or 2, but there's not many natives on that 30 under 30 list that I spoke to earlier, which is the ability to, like I said, if a resident was very, very, very upset that they were losing a tree in front of their house and they really wanted that spot replaced, you could use that 30 under 30 list trees to replace in that strip or a little bit back from it in their yard, knowing that we're not going to be encroaching on that overhead power line problem. But most of that lists non-natives,
Okay.
so that could be a problem
Yeah.
with that. So that might just mean that everything now would have to be replaced on the opposite side of the road.
And then I think I read on one of the memos that Eversource, did they offer to do something, or supply a tree list or supply
Jordan
some
can
trees?
probably speak to that. Jordan's here from Eversource.
They're going to pay for the whole thing.
Oh, good.
They're paying for the trees, but they're paying for the,
Jordan Young, arborist with Eversource. Yeah,
Jordan.
we would definitely be willing to donate a few trees, just as a show of goodwill. They would, if we were going to donate trees to be planted on the side of the power lines, we would only donate them if they were utility compatible trees.
Okay.
As far as the sizing goes, Mike is correct. Our list does not have a ton of natives on there, but I could work with him and we could figure something out.
Okay. All right, so that is part of the program that gets some donations. Okay. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Mr. Vincent?
Thank you. The question I had would just a note that trees that have good fall color would be preferable up in there too. Not having the total list in front of me, but that would be something to consider as well. So that would be nice. I don't know if you can if you're able to get some pictures of them in their fall
Yep, we can do that.
colors. That would help for the people. That's all I had. Thank you.
We're going to have Mr. Saban just ask a question, and we'll come right back to you. Mr. Saban, you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of a heartbreak, I drive down that road all the time, probably every day. I go to the post office, take the back road. Those pictures are not scenic, but I'll tell you, when there's leaves on those trees, it looks pretty cool. Unfortunately, a lot of those are not there today. You're going to change the entire look of this street. I mean, you're going to completely change the character of Old Main Street by taking all these trees down. I get it. I understand why. But that's a big deal. And I don't know if we can put this in our motion or not, but I would almost insist that any redevelopment of Old Main Street with regards to tree planting is done in a community basis with direct input, not from just the person whose house you're going to put a tree in front of, but the entire road. Maybe that whole, and I know because I was involved with the cultural center and I know that neighborhood very well. They're close-knit and they're concerned about what goes on, not just on Old Main Street, but Pleasant and Aiken and all the other side streets. So I almost want to demand, if I could, that the redevelopment process is one that is done on a community basis with direct input from that part of our neighborhood. You're literally changing the character of that entire part of our town. And it breaks my heart that you have to do it, but I understand that you have to, but that's to me is, you can't just go do what you want to do and put whatever kind of tree you're in because you can. I hate that. I think, the people that are going to have to live with it, I don't know if you live in town or if you live in that neighborhood, but, I'm remodeling a house right now, and the joke around the guys that are working on it are like, can't see it from my living room. Well, I won't see those trees every day from my living room either, but I live in this town, and I want to make sure that whatever we do to redevelop that is done in a way that has direct community input as to how you do it. Because what we're going to do in redevelopment is going to be something that our grandkids are going to see, our great-grandkids. We won't see the full development. I'll never see a canopy over that road again. But I want to make sure that when you do that process, that you keep those things in mind and understand that it is a historic area. That's why you're here to begin with. So do your darndest to preserve, the character of our town, and please promise us that you'll do it in a way of not just picking what you want, but doing it on a community basis and working with the neighbors as to how to redevelop that, because you're really going to change the entire look of that road. And so the only other questions I had were, and Will, thank you very much. You asked and answered a bunch of my questions asked. Because you're going to be changing the entire character of the road, today I took a particular notice of the trees on Old Main Street. Some of them have been, for a better term, butchered so much that they kind of don't even look like trees anymore. There's one on the corner of Old Salt Works Road that it looks like they cut half the tree off at one time because they probably didn't have to come to a hearing because they didn't remove a tree, so they just cut the top of it off, and now it's got kind of growth on it. So I guess I'm saying is, if we're going to do this, can we clean up the rest of the stuff that really looks kind of like we should probably get rid of that while we're at it? And I'll be glad to meet with you and point out some of the ones that I saw, but I think it's pretty obvious when you drive down the road. Some of them have been really just butchered to the point that if we're going to beautify and start over, then, as you say, with your clean canvas, then make sure we don't have splotches of paint already on the canvas. So just another comment that I had. And again, that's it. I think if we could put some kind of requirement that they come back at 2 years and tell us that it's done or something, maybe that's answer to Will's concern about how do we know that they get it done. But I haven't read any of the proposed motions, but that's all I really had is just, please you remember that people live here. You're changing what we're going to see forever. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Saban. You had a question.
My name is Carla Sharrow, and I live at 162 Old Main Street, and one of the trees is in front of our house. What concerns me about this is that there's a definite plan to remove the trees, but it doesn't seem like there's a definite plan in place to put the trees back. And my concern is that it falls by the wayside altogether. I think part of what makes a street scenic is a tree-lined street. Unfortunately, out of necessity, we have power poles in front of our house. What helps camouflage those power poles, especially in a historic district, is the trees. If the trees are gone, then it doesn't camouflage anything, okay? And if you're planting them on the opposite side of the road, it doesn't do anything for the trees that are lost on the side of the road where the power lines are. And that really bothers me.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions. In terms of sequencing, this might be a Robert B. Auer question. The tree removals kind of start at one end and go all the way, almost down to the cultural center. Is the plan to do them all at once or do them as you go? If we're going to be in the area for 3 years digging up, is it, I got to dig this tree up now because it's in the way for where I am right now, Robert B. Auer, digging the ditch? Do we know what the plan is on that?
Well, I'll let Mike comment on that a little bit, but what I will say is that Eversource has graciously agreed to remove the trees, right. And so that would typically be in one effort in order to do so. In addition, you've heard tonight that they're willing to donate some trees back as well, which is great. Yeah. But the removal, from my perspective, is a really excellent service because of the need for a bucket truck and pretty extensive effort in which to have those removed. But Mike, I don't know if you want to comment on the timing of that.
Mike Donovan, Robert B. Auer. I'm the superintendent on the sewer project here in town. We're currently we'll be working from the intersection of Route 28 and Old Main in front of the car wash, and we'll be progressing towards Bass River. We will take the tree. Eversource is going to help out with the removal as well as some, and then we'll be doing some pruning behind them. We bring the crews in, and to have them come in multiple times costs multiple dollars. So we come in once and we prune and we get it done. The crews will be starting on Old Main Street in mid-June and progressing down. we have to flip-flop around a little bit because of the state road restraints on when you can work out there and when you cannot. So sometimes we have to put one street aside to maintain, to go ahead and facilitate the state road. So that's why sometimes we'll have to come off and come back onto the state road until they say, no, you can't work any longer now, so we can come back and forth. So sometimes you have to flip-flop around a little bit, but Old Main's going to take some time. It's, like Jeff said, it's the main pipe for the town. And it's deep, it's 30-inch, it's going to take us a minute to get it in. So, but we intend on getting in as quick as possible and being able to restore the road as quick as possible as well.
And that part of the contract, Mr. Donovan, is the one that runs through September of 2026?
That's correct. The whole contract is one.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Susan?
I had one last question.
Sure.
Will there be, Jeff, will there be a number that citizens can call if they've got an issue or a problem or they need an answer right away? Will they be calling DPW? Will they be calling Michael? Who will they call?
Calling
if they've got-
DPW.
Okay.
Michael White does a great job for us, but he's not a full-time town staff employee. So the best conduit for issues, concerns, complaints, information is to call the DPW.
Okay.
Or email me directly.
All right.
Yes.
For the sewer project portion, is everyone required to link into the new sewer, or can they stay on their septic system?
No, you have to link in.
You have to link in, okay. And will be effective October 1st, 2026. Am I understanding that correctly?
You'll have some time to connect. There'll be a period of, I think the Board of Health has said 2 years for that to happen, once the system is active. But when Robert B. Auer is done with their pipes in the ground, we still have a treatment plant to build. There's still some other infrastructure that needs to happen. So it's not specifically that date necessarily, but there'll be a little bit of time. But if there is sewer available to you, you will need to connect in. That's how we're going to make progress with regards to removing nitrogen. Our embayments is to have everybody participate.
Okay, that's clear. On the sidewalk itself, I have irrigation that runs across the sidewalk too, and when the tree comes down, I don't know if that's my house or not, but no, I'm at 112. If that is disrupted, who pays to get that fixed?
Well, that's something that we need to work with you on. I don't expect that there'll be too much work on your side of the sidewalk.
Okay.
As was mentioned before, there will be a stub connection that comes across the sidewalk. We can work with you and the Robert B. Auer crew to try to, plan for that stub where you don't have irrigation, if at all possible. But most of the work is on the street side and shouldn't affect your irrigation.
Okay. And then for the road itself, so we have the trees down. We're gonna tear up the road and lay this 30-inch pipe in. Is there a grand vision of what the road will look like 2027 and beyond? Like, will there be brand new sidewalks? Like, how do you envision the road to look when the job is fully completed?
As of right now, there's no plan to make significant changes to the road or the sidewalk beyond, repaving or patching or, repaving the sidewalk as well as the road. As I mentioned before, our town engineer has looked at what other things could be done, and nothing's being proposed at this point to address the speed or other issues. And sometimes that involves changes, alignment, other things, but nothing has been determined that that's, what should be done. And she's still looking at that, talking to consultants about, maybe the best ways to try to address speed. But as it stands now, once the sewer is in, just repaving the road, repaving the sidewalk where necessary is all that's anticipated.
Okay. And this is where I think my concern, as I'm hearing more about this, is we're doing a lot of great work to move the street forward, right, into the 21st century. But we're cutting down trees, we're tearing up sidewalk, we're planting new trees that'll take 30 years to grow back, we're laying in a big pipe, but we have no vision for what this historic road will look like at the end. So there's no plan, there's plans being put in place, we're like patching it together with no real goal that we're working towards except laying in a big pipe in the ground.
Wait, I have a comment on that.
Yeah.
I think picking up on what Jim said, I think the plan is to make it look as historic and as lovely as it does now, to be, like the least harm, like do no harm or do the least amount of harm. I think the plan is to make it look as capey and as historic and as scenic as it is now. We're not going to take Old Main Street and make it look like Route 28. That's not going to happen. I think they're very cognizant. They're dealing with a residential neighborhood. They're dealing with residents like you who are very involved, that want to preserve the value that they have in their property. And as Jim said, if they get the community involved, it will work to their advantage to have to be part of the discussion. But there's no grand plan on the part of the town to make Old Main Street look any different. They want to upgrade it, they want to make it modern, but they don't want to change its DNA. They want to change some of the clothing, but the DNA is going to stay the same.
Right. Yeah, I just hate for
My
that
understanding.
I would just hate for that antique clothing to have a bunch of new holes in it and patches in it. That's just my stake, but I appreciate the answer, so thank you.
There's a rule for vintage clothing now. There is.
There we go. Yes, sir.
Has any consideration ever been given to bury the power lines?
Thinking that
Oh,
myself.
that would be wonderful.
Since we're digging a really
$1
big
million
hole.
a
Right.
mile,
Right.
and that was
Right.
5 or 6 years ago, so.
Mr. Colby answer.
Yeah.
Is there any
Anybody-
consideration, Jeff?
It's not a realistic consideration. We've certainly looked at that in other areas of town, and it's just cost prohibitive. I think the $1 million a mile is a well outdated number. And I don't think it would be fair to ask our friend from Eversource to comment on this, because he's really just focuses on the trees. But there's others at Eversource that have significant requirements with regards to infrastructure upgrades that they require if you do underground utilities, that just really makes it cost prohibitive.
The one other comment I'd like to make, and then we'll close the public hearing, is in line with what Mr. Rubenstein, actually the entire board, I think, is thinking aloud here, is that we have this very detailed plan with pictures and maps and locations and species. What I would like to see is when you figure out what you think your best plan might be, is you come back with a product like this that shows exactly where the trees might be going, what they are, and where they are, and that you've consulted with all of the appropriate people who might be affected, whether you invoke the Chapter 87 rule that you've mentioned, Mr. White, where you could engage the homeowner and have the tree on their property, if that were the case. I would like to see a plan come back to the planning board that's as good as this one to cut them down. Why can't we have a plan that brings back all of the same details with all of the replacements? And we will deliberate further once we close the public hearing, but I did want that to be part of the public hearing. And I don't think there's a requirement for that, Kathy, if I'm correct. The requirement is if you want to take down a tree or prune more than 4 inches, you have to get our approval and the tree warden's involvement. But there's no requirement on something like this. I don't even know if we have regulatory authority to ask them to come back.
Jurisdiction.
I think the concern is that this is something that I think they want to expedite because they have, Robert B. Hours got their contract ready, they're ready to go, and they need to be removed. So I think they were trying to move forward with the sewer project, but because of that, they have the detailed aspect of what they know they need to remove, but haven't had the time necessarily to develop the more detailed, complex plan of what would be redeveloped. So I think if we understand that instead of like continuing this hearing for another time, you need a little bit more time, and it's going to take a little bit longer than it would be for Robert B. Hour to be able to move forward with their, maybe it's an agreement that you would come back to the planning board. It's not necessarily something that you can require, but we could make it a condition if you agree to it, to, maybe it's a case where the applicant shall hold a public meeting with the Old Main Street residents and the planning board. We could help facilitate that, similar to what we're doing now, to finalize the location and species of trees to be replanted, and then to develop that detailed replanting plan for submission to the board.
If I could speak to that, I would like to even maybe to make this better, take this a step further, that we should probably formulate a resident committee of that street, that anyone who wants to be involved in the replanting of these trees can get involved and meet, and we can establish something where people who are passionate about it and want to be involved in where the trees will go can be involved where the trees will go, and we can have a nice conversation. People can meet and we can figure out everyone together. Everyone can have a piece to talk about all at once. That would probably be the best way to go forward with the replanting. That said, like Kathy said, this was something that was brought to my attention that needed to be addressed. So I addressed what needed to be done soon, and not hastily, but did not have the time to be able to put together a very large-scale replanting plan with particular sites and meeting with residents.
I apologize
Yeah.
if you read my comment that way. Between now and September 2026,
Plenty of
I would
time.
like to have, Kathy, I think you've already constructed the language on what a condition might be, that you come back, and I think your idea about engaging the homeowners in the district is a great one, because that will make it the best plan, no doubt, that you come back and show us and show the public what the plan is. I think that's where we would be most comfortable, but that's a separate linkage than from this particular application to remove the trees. But I do think it'd be a good idea that maybe after we close the hearing, we deliberate on that as a condition. Any other comments or questions? Sure.
Leslie Callahan, 280 Old Main Street. One of the trees is directly in front of my house. My question is, I understand what's going on for our street. It was very short term, and all of a sudden, we've got to cut trees down, and we never heard about this prior to this. What lesson are you going to take from this, what's happening here, to other streets in the town? Because I'm sure we're not the only street, and it's sad that it had to start on our historic street. Just a question as to going forward. How do you see this falling in other streets in the town? Thank you.
That's a good question. I would say that most of the other areas that we're working in, at least in the short term, aren't as sensitive or historic or don't have the large developed tree canopy issues that this does. But it's certainly something that needs to be looked at as part of the design process, and what trees may or may not be impacted.
This is also kind of unique to scenic roads because when trees are very protected and we can't cut them down, typically over a long period of time, those trees end up being very close to the road. Whereas other areas in town, you might see 4, 5, 10, even 15-foot wide shoulders off the side of the road where there's no trees. So it's kind of more unique to scenic roads that you typically will have large diameter trees like 1 foot off the side of the road. And as nice as that is for the scenic aspect, it makes it very difficult with clearance. So that's more or less unique to scenic roads. But to your point, this is something to take into consideration that moving forward when we're doing work on scenic roads in town, that this is going to be something we're going to be dealing with most likely. So,
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I
Mr.
comment on
Saban, sure.
that? So, that's all well and good, but what concerns me is that the roads that are not scenic, you get to do what you want without talking to anybody. There's no hearing required. So I would ask that, I know like Seaview Avenue has a canopy. So when you get to go down Seaview Avenue, that's not a scenic road. You don't need to you don't need to come to us.
Chapter 87 still applies to those, though. So you do have to have a hearing. You have to have a public hearing to cut any tree in the entire downtown.
In the entire town?
Yep, unless it's a
Done with your board.
unless it's a deemed hazard, assessed hazard, or a public risk, or if it's obviously storm damage, anything like that, where it's an actual risk of human hazard, you can't just cut a tree down in the town without a hearing.
So
It's just not with us.
it won't be with us,
Who's it with?
but there's going to be a hearing of some sort if you're going to cut down a tree somewhere in town.
Don't be.
And that would be with who, Mr.
Tree
Colby?
warden, with myself.
With yourself.
Yep.
It's his meeting. All right.
So,
He gets to run the
so
meeting. Okay.
to address the
trying to
young
fit.
lady's comment previously, it would probably be good for us to now take the layouts that we clearly know where all the sewering is going to go. Maybe not a bad idea to get in the car and drive around and look at these and then start having some hearings and meetings with people far in advance so that we're not in this situation, that you won't be in advance. So I think that's a way to solve the issue that the young lady had concerned herself about.
I agree, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Saban.
Good to know that you need a hearing to cut the tree down. Not on private property, just town property, right?
Town property.
Correct.
Any other questions from members of the board or the public? Comment?
I have one quick one, Joanne.
Certainly.
Chairman. I'm Ed Callahan, and I'm at 280 Old Main Street. And that happens to be my house right there. And I know you're cutting the tree down to give access to large equipment. Just take a look at that tree and the two branches that are going up there. You could easily pivot around that tree. I like the other young lady's point about camouflaging the wires and whatnot. Even if you put other trees in it, there's an aesthetic outrage to wires. No, hopefully no, intended, nothing intended in your direction, but there is an aesthetic outrage to that. And if within the context of the 10 trees, I don't know if there's another one like mine, because obviously I have a focal interest in that one, but that one, I can't see where equipment couldn't get around that tree. I mean, yes, I'm centered with regard to that because, I have a southern exposure, and those trees, when it's foliated, is going to completely cover my house. I love that. But I also love the way it looks aesthetically. There's no aesthetic outrage, when that thing's foliated. To Jim's point, when it's foliated, it's a completely different look. I mean, I have to admit, that's kind of ugly right there, but when it's foliated, it looks a lot better. So I guess my question would be, are there any within the 10 that you can look at as potential saved? I realize every ash tree is going out, but that one, I don't understand how the machinery couldn't get around that.
Could be Eversource or Robert B. Hour can answer this.
Mr. Donovan.
Picking up the roots, though, too. The pipe is going on that side of the road with the trees?
Yeah, you actually just brought up a good point that we haven't addressed tonight at all, and that's excavation is horrendous for tree health because you rip up all of their root material. So by some crazy chance, if this tree actually does have root material going under the roadbed, which I would be surprised, but if it does, yes, the pipe would be ripping up that root. And also, any tees coming across are also going to be doing the same thing. So you're going to have significant root damage on a tree that doesn't have a large root mass to begin with. Most of the roots on that tree are going along that, what you would call devil strip, and underneath of the sidewalk. It's not an ideal root zone. So to then be digging more of those roots up too is also problematic. But
won't that happen to the new trees as well?
No, because they're going to get planted after the project.
Mr. Donovan?
What we're going to be using is going to be 15 feet wide. The road is approximately 22 feet wide.
Okay.
It also swings out over the tracks. The counterweight in the back is rather large. If the counterweight hits the tree, which it very well may on that tree right there because it's so close to the road, that damage will kill the tree right away. There's more. We're not here to cut down trees. I initiated all this. I'm the one who called and initiated because I don't want to get into problems with just cutting trees. We need the room to move the machine. It is a very large machine. It's a very large pipe. It's very deep. It's all groundwater in there. There are multiple hazards going through there. To answer you, it was just, we have a lot of big gear to get in here, and we do need the room. We're not cutting trees to cut trees.
What about the telephone poles?
The telephone poles? Well, you can't move the telephone poles.
They don't have roots.
Well, you can pay for it.
We're more than happy to take on any work you want to give us.
Well put.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Could I do one moment of show and tell?
Sure.
Thanks. Okay, because I just want to understand this. Because I've been staring at this wall most of the hearing, and the record will show that. So where's the pipe going? Down the middle of the road, on this side of the road?
Basically in the middle, yeah.
Because there's a drain down the left side of that road.
Okay,
So you have to stay over to the right, but you have to also have a water main out there too.
Okay, so big giant machine is coming down the road.
Yeah.
And it's favoring this side. Because we're talking about trees only on this, well, mostly on this side, but not exclusively.
All on that side.
On that side.
These are all by the wires.
Side has been cut.
No, I got it.
So if we prune the side that we need, there's nothing left of the tree.
I just wanted to, I'm trying to imagine this, and so that's why I wanted to come up, thank you, Madam Chair, to understand. A big giant machine is going right down the middle of the road.
No one can hear you, Will.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, hi. A big giant machine is going right down the middle of the road and putting in a really deep pipe.
Yeah.
Okay. Because some people might say, well, why can't you just put it over there? So that's why I wanted that's why I wanted you to, because if I was somebody living here, I might say, well, why can't you just put it over there? So could you talk about that for a second? Because I think we're down to the minutia here, because this nice gentleman is talking about his tree, and I think it would be helpful if you could clarify some of that.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
been designed by the town. The town hired an engineer, they designed it, and that's where it goes. There's a drain, as we're looking at this road. I have to get my bearings, I'm not from around here.
All right.
I'm flip-flopped. So the drain is on the left side of the road.
Actually, this would drain right in front of.
Yeah, but that's, the drain trunk line is down the left side of the road.
Okay, oh, I see.
Yeah, it is.
The-
Almost in the travel lane.
Exactly. And you have a water main and a gas main. Water main on the right side of the road. The gas main is on the left. I was off the road a little bit. So the only avenue left. Now you got to remember, this is going to be a 12 to 14 foot wide trench to get this pipe in the ground.
It'll be as wide as the lane.
It's going to be more than a 1 lane wide, the trench itself,
That's a big old
to get this pipe down into the ground. We're not going to be digging a little 3-foot trench. It's going to be 12, 14 feet wide. So there's not much room left there to go anywhere else.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. That's why I just was trying to, again, notwithstanding the lack of canopy, which is, I understand you took the pictures when you took the pictures, but I was just trying to get a sense of the width of the actual trench and to put it into some sort of picture, because that's how my brain works, and to just sort of cement, no pun intended, where that was going. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. That was very helpful for me.
Any other comments or questions from the board or the public? Okay, I would like to have a motion to close the public hearing. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And I note the time as 6:39. Oh, we got to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. So now we have our discussion and deliberation. We have a proposed motion that is part of our planning packet that I hope all of us have taken into account, because we do need to think about those aspects of scenic road and tree taking. There are environmental issues we need to think about, historic, scenic, and aesthetic characteristics, any concerns for public safety, and then compensatory actions, which in this case is the replacement of the trees on a one-for-one, and obviously preservation of natural resources. So we have under consideration a motion to approve this application. And I'd like to open up discussion now with any other comments about that or concerns.
Madam Chair, would it be helpful, since you read the hearing notice, would it be helpful, since I don't know if everybody has the proposed motion, would you mind, would it help everybody in the audience to just read the motion so that folks know what the motion is?
Sure. I can do that.
Just to start, as a starting place.
Actually.
Does that make sense, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
It's
Or if it's on the screen, even better, just so folks can follow along.
Yeah, we've got enough.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
did we, in
Mr.
this
Saban.
discussion, we just talked about the issues of having community involvement. Was there some discussion about whether we have the authority to require that in our motion or not?
As Kathy was, I think you were writing a potential condition. I think we can ask.
So in our yellow highlight, it says installed within 3 years of this approval, all replacement trees shall be native species. If it's something that we can require that they come back with, or that they create a committee,
Well, I
some
think,
assurances to the neighborhood that they're going to be protected?
I think maybe, I guess there's a couple things that were discussed, and maybe we can just kind of discuss some of the specifics. One of the things had to do with replacement at 1-to-1. Is that something that you're comfortable with? I know that sometimes the replacement ratio is larger, 1.5-to-1, 2-to-1. Is that something you want to consider? I do agree with Michael that once you start getting into the larger caliper trees, it becomes extremely expensive and more difficult to install. So maybe you want to say a minimum of 3-inch caliper, but then maybe discuss whether you want to have a higher ratio. And then also, I mean, part of the application here called for a condition to that the location and species of the replacement trees shall be coordinated between the Department of Public Works, the Yarmouth Tree Warden, and Eversource. And then you could say, along with input from the residents along Old Main Street, and then the applicant shall develop a detailed replacement plan for review by the planning board. And then you could say, then there would be a separate item that this shall be installed within X number of years of approval. It's up to you guys to decide on that, with all replacement trees being native species. So, and then again, we'd have the, whatever condition you would want, the replacement trees shall be blank ratio at a minimum of 3-inch caliper. So I could read all of that, but those seem to be the things that I got out of the conversation.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's go through them one at a time then. The ratio. Any thoughts about the ratio?
Sure, I have some thoughts. I mean, if you wouldn't, well, it doesn't matter. We'll leave the motion up there. The gentleman that spoke earlier,
Well, these are blanks in the.
right, in the hat, right. As he was mentioning, we're going from a 50, I'm just going to use numbers respectfully. We're going from a 50-foot tree to, Mike, can you help me out? Where would these trees be in 20 years?
That is a very, very, very hard thing to actually
Totally,
answer.
I
Because
agree. I'm putting you on the spot.
Street trees are the highest mortality rate of any tree. The average street tree lifespan is actually only 20 years.
Okay.
So, you gave me the average lifespan for the high. I mean, the establishment is slower because they're usually in less than ideal conditions. Growing rate is slower, less than ideal conditions. So, coming up with native species that have a fast growing rate, that are resilient, you know, it really comes down to tree selection being one of the biggest parts of you getting that aesthetic back sooner.
How old are these trees we're taking down?
Most of the street trees in Massachusetts were the, oh my gosh, what's it called, the TVA? The elms were, but where our ashes are also. Anytime you see a monocrop planting, like all those ashes, it was done as one motion. It was a planting effort done by somebody. So it was done by the town. It's usually during TVA, when the, oh my gosh, was World War II, when they.
The Federal Work Program.
Yeah, they had it.
CC?
They gave a lot of
Conservation
funding
Commission?
for a lot of projects where they went around
1930s.
and did municipal improvements. So I would say these trees are, you know, I wouldn't think any of these trees are touching 100 years old.
Yeah, but
probably
sounds like
70.
But sounds like 70 plus.
Yeah.
Okay, so and the trees that you're, in theory, the trees that we're proposing that are native, that would be replanted across the street would be 10 to 20 feet tall? That's the part I missed, is how tall would the trees be when they're planted,
Well,
typically?
3-inch caliper is based on the diameter of the species that we're planting. So every tree species at 3-inch caliber is going to be a different height.
Okay,
So-
3-inch sweet gum,
3-inch sweet gum is going to be a 12-foot tall tree.
12 feet. Okay. Hold on, where's my list?
Don't hold me particularly.
I'm not, I'm just, well, again, I'm just trying to.
I'm like winging this out of my head here for
Googling you
you.
right now.
No. I'm trying to think about, the nice folks who are here.
Yep.
How about a 3-inch black Tupelo?
Same idea. They're going to be about the same size, about 12-foot tree.
And these trees, so we're talking 25%, right? 12 into 50. I'm using rough numbers. So we're talking a tree that's 25% of the tree that they had, notwithstanding the aesthetics of what we see on the road itself, with a mortality rate, on average, of 20 years,
Yes.
would you have an expectation if you planted a 12-foot tree in 2026, would you have an expectation that that 12-foot tree would, if the conditions were okay, would that tree would grow? I'm using rough terms here. That tree would grow, but it's certainly not likely, from what you're saying, going to ever be close to what it was.
Are you saying? Are you saying in
the tree you're planting in 2026 is not going to be 50 feet tall in 2076, right? I mean, I'm just trying to use like for like.
No, but what you are doing is by eliminating crown space on the street, you're also opening crown space for other mature trees that are on the street. So if you have crown competition right now between two trees, one across the street, one maybe on a person's property that's behind these trees that you can't see, those trees now can actually grow out and reach out over that. So you are going to get replacement canopy. Replacement canopy on the street isn't going to just be by what we're replacing with. By creating open space, you're actually creating the ability for other trees to replace that canopy.
I totally get that,
So-
but basically what we're talking about is 25% of the size of what we have now
Yes.
across the street, with a very small chance for those trees to get really big.
May I make a comment here?
Please.
I think you're still thinking that they're going to be planted right up against the street like these ones.
Yeah.
And they're going to suffer more, but that's not the plan. They're going to be put farther back so they have a better chance of survival. Okay, so they're
point-
not
yeah,
that's a
street
good point,
trees
Chris.
that are
I
right
get
there like
that.
this. They're pushed back, so their chances of survival are going to be a lot better.
That 20-year mortality rate is if we replant in the Devil Strip where those trees are.
Ah, okay. But that's not
by
where we're...
setback planting and putting it possibly into somebody's property, or at least getting it more than 1.5 feet off the side of the road,
Right.
we drastically increase the lifespan and likelihood of establishment of that tree every foot that we go back from the road.
Right.
So
But and that's okay. So that's where it ties back into you having a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
You know, and having the public engagement that Mr. Saban and everyone else, I think, feels is pretty vital here. Because as you just pointed out, Chris, and I'm glad you did, it's easy for me to just keep my tree blinders on and just say, well, if it's going to be planted but just directly across the street, how does that help? At the same time, it doesn't sound like, I think the expectations should be managed about, even with all those factors, you know, hopefully ameliorated by doing what you just said. It doesn't feel like a really strong chance that we're going to get back to what we had.
we're never going to have
Right,
a crown replacement along the power lines.
No.
It doesn't make sense
No,
to
I get
do
it.
that.
I'm
So
not talking about the power lines, but I'm talking about even opposite of the power lines. Those chances are not amazing. They're not nothing though.
They're great. They're great
Okay.
if we actually set back plant and
All right.
plant correctly.
All right.
What
Well,
I'm
then-
trying to say is that where the trees are is that 20-year. We're not gonna. No, we're never. I would never put a tree where those trees are and tell you that we'll make it even past 15 years.
Okay, I get that. So I guess really, so I can stop blathering on, it's really about the conversations in whatever format, Madam Chair, and whatever mechanism is the right one to have on an ongoing basis 6 to 26 months from now, you know, to have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I think Kathy's worked on some legitimate language, but I'd like to just go back to my question.
The ratio.
There's an element that we need to lock in on,
Yes.
ratio.
Yeah.
Are we all comfortable with a 1-to-1? I'm not.
I have a question regarding that. Obviously, it would be much nicer to have more trees.
Yeah.
If you're going to take down these big ones, put in more trees. My question is, who pays for it?
Right.
Yeah.
There you go. If a homeowner wants to add a tree into their own yard, by all means, they can put one in, they can pay for it. But as part of the project, if we're going to say it's no longer, you're taking down 10 trees, you're going to put back 10 trees. We're going to make you put in 20 trees. Who's paying for the extra 10?
Anything that I commit to, the town is paying for. It's the bottom line.
But the 10 trees currently and the removal by Eversource, the cost to the town and us is zero.
No, there's going to be stump grinding required. Eversource is not donating 10 trees
Oh, they're
back. I mean,
not.
we still have to work through how many they're
Okay.
willing to give.
Yeah,
and-
I understand.
and,
I understand. But there's
and I think
some.
we can. There's some.
There's
Yes, there's
some.
some offset,
Okay.
but there'll be some cost to the town for what we're talking about today.
Trees, a couple $100.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question about that?
Yes.
About the ratio. So Jeff, you don't have a budget for trees, do you?
We do have a tree budget.
You do?
It's relatively small, but we do have a tree budget.
Right. So, okay. I was just thinking about how the good news is, if there is some, that this is not something that is going to be in your budget for another 24 months. I'm talking about the replanting because that also has a cost. Even if the trees are donated, they still need to be planted, right? And they still need to be dug and put in. And so is that what you're talking about when you say you have a budget? You're talking about for tree replacement or tree removal?
Budget for tree trimming, removal, and replacement all in one budget.
Same bucket.
All same bucket.
Okay.
There's no breakdown of what that looks like.
I understand
Depending
that.
on what the conditions are here,
course.
there might be a large portion of that budget for the next 3 years that goes to replanting, but we have to figure that out.
Okay.
So here would be my follow-up question.
Okay. So where are you on ratio?
What's the ratio that doesn't break the budget?
I think the one-to-one doesn't break the budget because our work with Eversource will try to get as many as we can, and the town will pay for the rest of them.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Mr. Saban?
So I just have a couple of quick questions. First is with regards to the caliper of the tree. What's a typical caliper that you would put in? I don't want to require you to put a 5, and you're typically putting in 3s. And
3-inch would be typical for a replacement tree.
That's
You also would see that, like, typically if you looked at a landscape architect design for a streetscape from a road betterment project, that's typically 3-inch replacement trees. You know, when you look at like grand rebuilt road landscapes, they usually use 3-inch as a standard.
And that 3-inch would typically be what you said, the 10 to 12 foot high. When you plant
8
it,
to 12.
somewhere in that
Yeah,
range when you
in that
plant
range,
it.
yeah.
And it has a grow rate, not like a Leland that grows a foot a year or something.
No,
but-
I mean, every individual species has their own individual grow rate. There's some very, very slow growing native trees, so maybe those would be things we would shy away from on this plan because the desire is to replace the canopy.
Like if you were to go to buy that tree today, Coastal Nursery, what's it going to cost?
Wholesale, if you were to just go buy a red maple
What are we
3-inch, they're like $500.
So
So it's not going to break the bank for.
But you have to take it in. No, but you have to take into consideration that. But there's much, much more to planting a tree than the cost of the tree.
Okay.
There's the labor to installing the tree. There's transportation of the tree. So that's taken into consideration. You even source the tree. Some of these trees you might have to source out in Western Mass even. So you're taking in transportation, labor for installation. You have to take into consideration aftercare. Because if you plant a tree and walk away from it, it's about a 90% chance that it's not going to make it. So you need aftercare plans, which means you need watering plans. You need people looking after them to make sure. Most of these trees are probably going to, there's a chance that some of these trees might have to be replaced down the line anyways from mortality with another replacement tree within the first year from not establishing. So there's much, much, much more cost to planting a tree than just the cost of the nursery stock.
Remember, we live in Massachusetts, prevailing wage. Pay those union dues, too. Madam Chair, if I can, I think it's kind of hard to put a ratio. I agree 1-to-1 is really not, but there is no policy that we've ever had to say that when you, I got stuck with this with conservation, the policy of what is an appropriate ratio of, is it 1-to-1, is it 2-to-1, is it, where do we figure that number out? And again, having trust and faith in our town employees and our community, I would believe that if we could say a minimum of 1-to-1 and give them the flexibility to say, hey, right here we should really put 2 or 3. And so I don't want to tie their hands to say 15 or 20 when really they only need 12. So I'd like to give them the discretion to figure that out, but a minimum of 1-to-1, but with some leeway that says, hey, you know what? When we met with not just the street, I would suggest, not just Old Main Street, but the I think it's called Bass River Homeowners Association, Neighborhood Civic. There's a group, they have a neighborhood and everything, so those are the people you want to talk to, just not the people on Old Main Street, because, like I said, it affects our whole town, and particularly that neighborhood. So I would like to be able to give them the ability to go more
Right.
But not say to them, hey, you have to have 20, and then have them stick a tree somewhere just to get to 20.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay, any other comments on ratio? I think insertion of the word minimum works. I'm seeing some nods. I also see that the 3-inch caliper is one of the items we all agree on, right? Okay.
I think another minimum might be called for there as well, Madam Chair. There might be a tree or two that Mike thinks.
Yeah, minimum.
Maybe a 4.
minimum.
I don't know.
Yeah, right. Minimum.
No, yeah, that's especially if you come
3-inch
across
caliper.
nursery stock that's discounted, you can get bigger trees.
Bigger
Sure.
is better.
Yep.
More is better. The other element here is the time frame in which we would want this to be accomplished. We had talked about 2 years. Jeff, in your comments, you said the hour contract runs out till September of 2026, so perhaps 3 years.
I think that would be more realistic, right?
And you have communicated that as such to the board, that 3 years would be more likely doable, but not beyond that. 3 years, that seem?
Well, Madam Chair, I mean, this is a pretty big project, as the superintendent has already described. I mean, it is possible that it will be September of 2026 and the project's not done. So then, does that mean that Jeff or Mike would have to come back and ask for an extension?
Yeah, you have to come back and get the permit extended.
Right, and that would have to be communicated in some way to the public as well. But again, that's only assuming that there isn't any public engagement, but it feels like we're going to hopefully ask for some mechanisms to do that.
Well, the project won't be done, but I'm assuming the 2026 is that section of
Old
the
Main.
project, Old Main Street.
Correct, right.
And not any of the side streets or any of the little fingers that go off into Aiken and Homer, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. Right.
So you want the clock on the completion of the Old Main Street section of this. In other words, I don't want you to come back and say, hey, we haven't got Aiken put in yet and haven't got Pleasant Street put in yet. So now that project is now 10 years down the road.
You could tie it to the current Robert P. Hour contract. They don't have a contract to do those roads.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are future phases. Yeah.
So Mike, based on that, should we say September of 2026? I know you guys had talked about 2 years or 3 years, but it would be from today's date.
Yeah.
3 years would
Two
more
and a
likely be
half.
2027.
3 years makes sense. Because
Who's going to be responsible for putting the trees back in? Our company or the town?
The town.
Okay, so we don't have to hold the our company to anything on that.
No, and hopefully they'll be done
We're just
quicker than
using
that
their
timeframe.
contract as our clock.
Exactly.
So do you need a certain time after the completion of their contract for you guys to do your work? That's the only hesitation I had with regard to the September.
It would be wise to, so that you have adequate time to source trees and develop a plan, and especially if we're going to have community outreach with the replanting, having residents involved. That's all a lot of time-consuming things. So to put it that right when they're done with construction, we would be sticking trees in the ground, there would be a lot of things all happening at the same time. So it might be.
You'll ought to be working on some of that. When you get close, you're going to know to start working, so.
There's better times to
I think
plant than
3
others,
years.
right?
Right.
Yeah, and
Planting
also,
times.
if it fell into the middle of the summer or the middle of the winter, there's-
Right.
so we would have to plan accordingly.
So 3 years work for you?
I think that's it. From what we know at this time, that works. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's 8 months after September is May of 2027. So I'm just trying to.
Yeah, perfect. Spring planting.
So that's 8 months. And obviously, I hope for your sake that you'll start some of those conversations well before May of
Yes.
2027.
Yes.
So that you'll be sourcing trees in the winter of 2027 to plant in the spring of 2027.
Kathy, what language did you have? I'd just like to go to the other piece that's new with regard to a report back to us.
Yeah.
With a replacement, the tree replacement plan, if you will.
Yeah, I just had the applicant shall develop a detailed replacement plan for review by the planning board.
He knows they've got 3 years, so.
Yeah. Got 3 years to get one to us.
and we're done.
Do we make that a separate condition, or do we have, can we just leave that as part of the one condition?
I guess if you want, I can maybe, based on what I've heard, I can tell you what I think the motion would be.
Okay, go ahead.
So a motion to approve the removal of 10 trees within the road layout of Old Main Street varying in size from 18 inches to 24 inch plus and consisting of 8 ash trees and 2 maple trees. And this is something that's important. You need to just to outline the reason why you are allowing this to be removed based on the criteria that the board had to look at. So due to the need to accommodate installation of the sewer collection system to improve water quality, which is the environment, the poor aesthetics and impairment of the existing trees due to overhead utility pruning, concerns that pruning the trees would cause mortality, improvements in the reliability of the electrical grid, and provisions for replacement trees, I would take out at a 1-to-1 ratio because we'll deal with that later. So provision for the replacement trees using more appropriate species and locations with the following conditions. The location and species, number 1, the location and species of the replacement trees shall be coordinated between the Department of Public Works, the Yarmouth Tree Warden, and Eversource, along with input from residents along Old Main Street and other stakeholders. I think Jim had mentioned other stakeholders. The applicant shall develop a detailed replacement plan for review by the Planning Board. Number 2, the replacement trees shall be a minimum of 1-to-1 ratio with a minimum 3-inch caliper tree. All replacement trees shall be native species. And then number 3, replacement trees shall be installed within 3 years of this approval.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Could we have some discussion?
Yes, we can have discussion.
So I like everything.
The usual next
Thank you,
step.
Madam Chair, you're right. The one part I just think is a little bit of a gray is the part where it says the tree plan to be reviewed by the planning board. I think there should be a date. I don't think it's unreasonable to say 2 years from now. If the planting we're asking for everything to be planted in 3 years, I don't think it's unreasonable to say we'll come back in 2 years or something.
Prior to completion of the contract?
Even better. I just wanted to throw it in there only because I think it will just create the sense that, again, we're all assuming we're all going to be here in 3 years doing the jobs and living the lives we live, but we can't. So we need to make sure that those that are doing all this work and these jobs at that time understand what the guardrails are, and I just think we need one more set of guardrails. The 3 years is a guardrail, but an interim guardrail, Madam Chair, I also think would make a lot of sense.
Report back, okay.
Yes.
So is this like an emotion to amend the motion to require a replacement plan be submitted to the planning board within 2 years of this approval?
You want to do 2 years, or you want to do prior to completion of the contract?
Completion of contract.
I'll defer to you guys. I just think it should
To
be
the
in there.
completion of the contract.
Okay.
But we should put the date in, because that could, if you get extensions, that could change that. So what,
You have a
I
completion
think 2 years
date.
gives you enough time to figure out what the plan would be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think 2 years, let's just say, I think 2
June 1st
years.
of 2026. Oh, 2 years from the date of this
From
agreement.
the date of the
I
permit.
see.
You got 2 years to meet with the public and.
That's plenty of time, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
So, that's
So this is an amendment?
the
to-
amended motion?
This is,
I make that amended motion to add that section.
may I have a second?
Somebody needs to second the motion.
Oh, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the all in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Unanimous?
So what happens is I need to work up a decision that then gets clocked in with the town clerk, and I will send it to you with these conditions outlined.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, Michael, and thank you for the public for coming this evening. We really appreciate your interest. Thank you again.
Great, thank you.
Be kind
We'll
to
keep
Old
you
Main
posted
Street.
on the replacement plan.
That breaks my heart. I know progress is progress, and you gotta do
Just don't know what else you do.
The worst is going to fall on somebody's house, and they're going to say, why didn't you do it when you had the chance? You got a court hearing and a
So
court
back
case.
a bazillion years ago, there was a couple of guys in town who took it on themselves and planted all the
but it's his
trees, I
life.
forgot what the trees were, along 6A in Yarmouth.
Yeah.
Next on our agenda is discussion, trying to plan ahead a little bit. Mr. Vincent will be retiring from the planning board. We're sorry to see you go, Chris. How many years?
15.
Oh, my God. Wow.
You guys have a long way to go.
Oh, yeah.
My
we
last
do.
remaining original planning
Yeah,
board
I've been here
member
longer
when
than
I got
Kathy.
here.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
Well,
thank you.
if I add them together, I'm
yours
kind of catching up.
Yeah, you can catch up. So in advance of our usual September meeting where we do our committee assignments, Kathy suggested we accelerate this because there has been a quorum issue. A couple of the members of the committee that Chris serves on have been out for some serious medical issues. And so I wanted to put it out there for people to start thinking about if they're interested. Anybody interested?
In what?
Design Review Committee.
Being the new Chris on
Just, design review, it's
design review.
when developments come in, right, you sit down, the things have been well vetted already by Kathy and them, and it's really just a review of what they have. It's,
The architectural and site design standards have different criteria for siting your development on the property, as well as certain building strategies, what the building would look like, how it's modulated, what the roof might look like. And then they go before, most of the time, projects like a commercial development south of Route 6 would go to the Design Review Committee for advisory review, and they would review those criteria. Those materials, a comment sheet, would get submitted to the ZBA should there be a special permit, and they kind of take some of those things into consideration. There's also mandatory projects, like when you have a hotel motel overlay district, that's mandatory requirements of meeting the architectural site design standards, which the committee looks at. But then you guys also know that you guys are the design review authority for a bunch of things, the road applications and the also VCOD as well as the HMOD too. So it's just another committee that kind of looks at more of the aesthetics and the design and how things get laid out as people are redeveloping their properties.
it's not a lot of heavy lifting from my perspective as the representative from the planning board there. It's, a lot of the work has been done when you get there.
Madam Chair, I'm currently supposed to be the Housing Committee representative. However, I've had difficulty attending their meetings because they've been, when I was a working man, meeting in the middle of the day. So it was difficult for me to attend any of their meetings. It may still be. So if somebody else is interested in housing, I would certainly find design review a much more palatable place for me to be.
Okay, so you have some interest.
Well, if I'm going to do something, I feel frustrated that I can't participate in all the housing stuff that has taken place because of, they have their
When did
meetings
they- when
at
did they
3
usually
o'clock in
meet
the
this?
afternoon.
They're Tuesday at 4:30, so it's late
So
after.
it's later in the day.
Yeah, later in the day, end of the
And
day.
it's infrequent.
It's infrequent, yeah. When
When something comes up, right, when a project comes.
we just had 2 projects this past Tuesday.
But then might
It's
not have another one
sporadic.
for a couple of weeks.
Anyone else?
Couple of months.
Typically see 7 to
Through
8
you,
a year, I would
Will?
say.
No, I don't.
Okay.
My time, I can't.
I have a lot of opinions on things, Madam Chair, but in this particular case, no, I really would hope, and this is because of Chris's ability, not because of his leaving, that we can find someone who has a special set of skills, as an actor once said, to help fill this role. So I recognize that you want to get it filled before Chris leaves.
No,
No.
once
Or as
No.
part of Chris leaving, but hopefully the
Want to be in a
recruitment.
position.
stuck doing it till July
He's still
31st.
doing it till, he's still doing it till August 1st.
I'm hopeful that we're able to recruit some. I guess what I'm saying is, I really hope the new person can do it.
So a builder or an architect or
Right.
something like
Or
that.
someone in that world, hopefully.
Perfect.
It would be lovely, but I understand that that isn't necessarily likely.
Feel a little better. I kind of built a house or two. but-
I guess what I'm trying to say is no thank you.
Okay,
Hopefully someone else got it.
that's an interesting way to say it, but, okay.
But in the absence of anybody else, Madam Chair, for your sake, I hope
Got
that.
Mr. Saban put his hand up, so.
Well, he
Right,
wants
but
to
he's trying
trade.
to
He's
trade,
not,
though,
he's not
Madam Chair.
volunteering.
But he's trying to trade.
I'm not taking both on.
No, I
I'm
understand.
not even doing the job that I'm supposed to be doing on housing, and that's not my typical me.
Okay. But Mr. Vincent will have us covered between now and
I got you.
whenever.
I got you.
I
That's
thought there
great.
was a rule that he had to find a replacement before he could leave.
Yeah.
We do need to get the replacement approved by the select board So that's why I brought it up earlier, because even though he has through July 31st, he needs to get on an agenda.
On the agenda. So how quickly can we get something on the select board?
They're meeting on June 5th and June 25th.
So we
and
could
then-
shoot for the 25th?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Okay.
Did you want to wait till the next meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Susan wasn't here.
Okay.
Or Ken.
Or Ken, for that matter. Yes, thank you. You're a good clerk. You are a really good clerk.
It's a team effort, Madam Chair.
Yeah. Okay. So, will that will work if we hold that?
Defer it till the next meeting, yeah,
Great.
sure.
Thank you, Jim, for your interest. We have meeting minutes from April 3rd. May I have a motion to accept meeting minutes?
I would like to move that motion, Madam Chair.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous?
Abstain.
Oh, abstain, okay.
Missed that one.
All right, any committee updates?
I have one. The Water Resource Advisory Committee met on May the 6th, and there has been more progress. Slow but steady progress. I think we're at the point where we were told that Mass DEP is starting to draft the approval of the groundwater discharge permit. Be still, my beating heart.
I know.
The DEP is moving. That's the good news. The news that is, I guess, more interesting is the way the parameters have been set with the groundwater issues at the proposed Buck Island plant is it's probably only going to really be able to treat 30-ish% of phase one. But again, I had spoken at previous meetings and given previous updates that the town is going to have to use Bayberry Hills in a massive way in order to help make phase one happen, as well as the land that the state owns at Exit 8 and Station Avenue. So that is all still true. There's going to be 3 places for this groundwater to go. It's just not all, just a lot less of it is going to go into the plant. Because again, not because anybody necessarily did anything wrong at the town level, and I won't use the word wrong when I talk about the state, but let's just say the state came with some parameters that were unexpected. And, originally it was like very little could be discharged with the plant, and now at least there's been some give and there's been some progress, so that's good.
So you're talking about shutting down Bayberry Hills?
I am not talking about that. I'm actually talking about an expansion of the ponds and the irrigation ponds. No. I never.
They're not going to shut down the course.
No. And I never said that, Madam Chair, for the record. I never did say that Bayberry Hills would be affected in terms of playing golf.
I think he's thinking maybe of the Bass River golf course, where when they were looking at that for effluent, they would have to dig it all up and put in the trenches underneath.
Right. Well, that's not currently under discussion. It's just Bayberry. And we're looking at, they're looking at up to 250,000 gallons per day. Yeah.
So it gets cleaned at the plant, and then it gets shot over to the pond.
Right. And then it gets reused at the golf course to help irrigate the beautiful golf course. So ultimately, it will be a good thing. I just think for Mr. Colby isn't here anymore, but I imagine he and the consultants were under the impression that the plant would be able to handle a lot more. However, some of that was taken out of their hands. The other quick update, well, as we heard, there's been progress throughout town. And I don't know about you, but if you drive around town, you may have noticed that except for the Route 28 sections that will end at Memorial Day, the other phases that don't work around on 28 will continue. Because that's really the only way to get this work done, is if they don't stop. Last thing is there will be a meeting tomorrow night with the Conservation Commission just to keep everything moving and happy with those folks as it relates to all the groundwater discharge. So it's all moving in the right direction. And again, as long as the septic plant is approved and contracts are signed by October 31st, then we will not lose our 0% loans. And so that, until I have any worse news, we're still on track for October 31st. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else, committee reports?
I was going to do a staff update.
So no committee, okay. Any other board member items they wanted to bring up? Kathy, you're going to mention the LCP meeting on Friday? Okay, so you got that. Correspondence, you've been sending us some.
I have one small item, Madam Chair,
I do have,
when you're done.
I have a correspondence. I don't know if we shared this with everybody, Kathy, from the Old
No.
Kings Highway.
Yeah.
On this subject from this evening, Old Kings Highway wrote to me as the chair, asking us to add some more streets to the scenic road inventory and to delete some streets. Apparently Weir Road is on the scenic, and Longs Road. So I haven't done anything with this yet, but they're asking that Thatcher, Church, Winter, Center, and Old Church Street be added as scenic.
These are what, off of 6A, right? Winter?
Correct.
Those
Correct.
streets?
Thatcher or Thatcher Shore?
And apparently this, this map that outlines the scenic hasn't been updated in quite some time, they said. 1974, which is 50 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
Yeah, the actual regulations for the scenic road was adopted on April 27, 2011. I don't know how these scenic roads were determined at that time, so I don't know whether there was we just took something from a 1974 report or something and put that in, or whether we can change it or not change it. So I would need to figure out how this kind of got developed to begin with, and how the streets got determined, and then whether we can be changing them. It's really just you can change these rules through a public hearing.
And we change them.
Yes.
As
long as it's not a state regulation or some other criteria with
This is
regard
something we take an action on. Okay. And
If I can, Madam Chair, I get 2 words. Duncan Oliver.
Oh, you might know.
He probably knows.
yeah, he could probably be a really good resource. Yep. So that might be coming up on an agenda at some point.
In all honesty, I'm not rushing to it.
No, and I may put a letter together, Kathy, just to be responsive and tell them that we'll get to it when we can get to it. So that was the one piece of correspondence I wanted to share with you guys. I interrupted you, Kathy. Go ahead.
They say. Thank you, as usual. Are we on staff updates?
Yeah.
Where we are?
Yep.
And then I have a question after Kathy's done.
That would be you.
That would be me. Okay. Local comprehensive plan. I don't know if all of you picked these up, but I did distribute these, and they did distribute them at the annual town meeting, and it kind of gives people a brief update and sends them to the vision plan, and then also sends them to a new website, which is very easy, yarmouth.ma.us/LCP. Cool. And that will get you to the town webpage where it's updated all the information that we had the kickoff meeting, and a bunch of other information is on there as well. And then it also includes on the same website and also on this little card how you can sign up for email notifications. I think you might remember from the April 3rd kickoff meeting, we had talked about whether we were going to go with Constant Contact or Civic Send or whatever. So we've actually come up with Civic Send. And anybody who signed up previously for the Visioning Constant Contact, your name has already been automatically moved over to this list. I'm going to send out a test tomorrow. So hopefully you've all signed up for Notify Me, or signed up for the Visioning way back in the day. But if you don't get anything tomorrow, you'll know that you're not. So that's been some nice progress. VSC is working on reviewing a bunch of existing plans that we have. We sent them some updated information on some of the plans that we have. And they're reviewing that, and they're starting to compile the existing conditions, information, and the mapping. We're going to have a meeting with them on Friday to kind of talk about some stakeholder interviews, the groups that we might want to be doing, and then also specifically kind of what type of interview questions are we going to be asking? Are they going to be consistent questions? Are we going to ask different groups different questions? Some of the things that Joanne and I had been talking about is the vision plan basically comes up with very specific kind of goals and objectives. So how about what action would you take in order to meet this objective? or this goal, how would we get there? Because what we're really trying to get is specific action items that we can get to. Because I think the vision plan kind of really is a very good basic overall idea of where we want to go, but now we need to start fleshing out the details of how we actually get there. And so the kind of in July and August, they're going to really be prepping for that first public engagement, which will be in September. So hopefully we'll have some more discussions with them on what they were kind of really envisioning that would be and how we would be getting that information out. The one thing that I haven't heard anything about, I know that they had some staffing issues, is the web page that they're going to be developing. We have the web page that we have that I put the information on because I wanted to get that to people, but ultimately we will include the link to their detailed web page, which will have more of that interactive opportunities for people to provide their input and get more graphics and more information from them. Our page will kind of end up being more of a landing page, sending them to the BSC's group's landing page. So that's kind of, unless you have something else, that's kind of like where we stand on the LCP. We also are going to continue, we have been continuing to work on the Route 6A Village Centers streetscape improvements project. We had a meeting with some stakeholders in November, got a lot of really great information. I think a lot of general interest and support to see some improvements in the village streetscape. You know, we're looking at things like sidewalks and curbing and crosswalks and how we can enhance the crosswalks for safety. So we're going to be having another public meeting. It's going to be here in the hearing room on May 30th at 6 p.m. It's going to be in person as well as remote. And we're going to kind of go over the work that the VHB, our consultant, has been doing to kind of take all of those comments that we received and kind of fleshing out and putting in more and more detail into the plan so we can get more public input. We'll also have some more specifics with regard to like materials that people might be able to choose from and really kind of start narrowing down some of what are our preferred alternatives for that particular project. We are also need to be working on updating our hazard mitigation plan. Never a dull moment here in the town of Yarmouth. We did get a grant, and we are going to be working with the Cape Cod Commission, who helped us with our 2017 hazard mitigation plan. And I've been sending out some feelers. Actually, today, we need to come up with a hazard mitigation plan team that includes not just town staff or government officials, but also community leaders, business owners, as well as just general people who have other interests in this particular field. So I don't know whether it's not an official committee, it's just a team. So I don't know if anyone from the planning board has any particular interest on the hazard mitigation plan, but you're more than welcome. I did send out something to staff, kind of asking them to talk to their boards and committees and see if anybody might be interested. I actually have 2 people sign up today, so there is some interest in it.
Oh, that's great.
So that's something that's going on. And that's something that probably won't start until July, and it'll probably run a full year. Not a super heavy lift. It's a relatively short plan. It's really providing feedback and insights on information that's presented. The Riverwalk Park project, Robert B. Auer was the low bidder for Phase 1, which includes all of the site work, the boardwalk, the playground area, and the kayak launch, but not the restrooms. And we're going to be having a pre-construction meeting with them at the end of the month on the 31st. So hopefully we'll start getting construction going, start seeing some movement on that in June. We still need to bid out Phase 2, which is going to be the restroom in the center. But we also are going to be giving an update to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, to update them on the project on June 25th. But we also need to talk about things like plank sales. We now have some information on the engraving costs. We have information on what the planks cost. So we were going to be having another dissect meeting sometime in June, and I need to send out that doodle poll in order to kind of go over what we might want to recommend to the Select Board to charge for those boardwalk planks. They're going to be more expensive than the ones at Bass Hole because they're hardwood. They're different type of wood completely, and they're 6 feet long instead of 4 feet long. So I think it was like $150 at Bass Hole, and I think we're really looking more like $400 because we are trying to get some additional revenue for maintenance of the whole park. So that's something that we would be discussing with the select board, as well as the formal name of the park. We got to start working on an actual sign for now that we have the project bid, so we need to be sure that we have a final name for the park. Those are the two big items, and then, of course, talking to them about naming rights and donations and other ways of getting some funding, which you guys helped on with regard to the sign bylaw amendments that we did I can't even remember, last fall. And then the open space and rec plan went before the select board. Consent agenda, which they approved the edits. They had gone before them on April 9th. They had some comments. The open space and rec ad hoc committee met. They agreed to some edits. We presented it to the select board in the consent agenda, and they approved it. I did send it all in to Melissa Cryan at the state, and she still has some she would like us to.
Say what now? This is not. I
think I've gotten it down to 3 things, and I think we're in very good shape. So
things that may not require another meeting.
We're not going to meet again. I'm just going to make the changes. So they're not that significant.
Thank you.
So I think we're all set, and hopefully when I have those changes, I do need to have Weston and Sampson do a map edit. So they need to add something on a map. So that should be very, very close. The housing production plan has actually been formally submitted to the state for their approval, so hopefully that will be something that's coming back. I did have the scenic road things on my list, but you covered that. One of the other things that's coming up before the select board also, I think it's in August, is looking at a public art committee charge so that we can start looking at a way of developing and getting public art on town property. We're not going to start talking about private property like murals or anything like that. I think we need to start with public property, get that system down pat, come up with some guidelines, and see what we can get. Obviously, the Riverwalk Park is an ideal location for a lot of that public art, so we have a vested interest. But we've been working, I did send it to the chambers, very interested in public art, as well as the cultural center, so the charge was sent to them to see if they had any comments on it before we present it to the select board. And the last thing is zoning amendments. I know it's like we're never out of zoning season. Mary Wagon has been working with the Community Housing Committee on some language for modifying the calculation for the payment in lieu of affordable housing being constructed to get it more in line with the actual cost of doing it. I think you may recall that there was a request from some citizens with regard to some changes to the seasonal employee housing section related to, excluding the HMOD2 from being over the 15% and maybe some edits to some of the definitions. That's at town council. He's been busy with town meeting. He's going to get back to me after he's made it through town meeting seasons. And then I know that we also had some discussion on solar canopies as being potential, and I do know that there is, the ZBA is going to have a solar canopy for, was it St. David's Baptist? Is it the Episcopal Church?
Parking lot.
Yeah, on the parking lot.
I think that was continued. I'm pretty sure I read that was continued.
That continued?
Yeah.
So that's something that, as much as I'd like to get to the solar canopies, I don't think I am going to be able to start doing some research on that. And I don't know whether that's something that, if the planning board wants to move forward, maybe some of the other members can start maybe doing some research on that. What are other communities doing? How are other communities addressing? And it's not just solar canopies. I think we might probably, if we're going to tackle it, we need to tackle the whole thing. But we are going to be, busy with some regulatory thing. We have the VCOD site plan review for 811 Route 28 on June 5th, and then we'll talk about it a little bit later, but at whatever next meeting we have, we're going to also have, I think, a road application for 228 Route 28, which was a mixed use.
Where is that?
It's the old Tasty Buffet.
Johnny's.
Johnny's.
Tasty buffet.
It's vacant now. The building had been torn down.
Was
So
that the same place that they proposed the go-kart track?
Exactly same
Okay,
place, yeah.
that helps me. I haven't been here as long as you guys. So, I know where the Tasty Buffet was. I don't know the previous names.
So that, I think, is my updates.
Wow, okay.
May I ask 2 quick follow-up questions, Madam Chair?
You may.
On the agenda, on the calendar for the select board, this ties into what Kathy was just saying. It looks like they have put November 19th as a special town meeting date.
That makes sense because of the presidential elections.
They're pushing that a couple weeks.
Yep.
Okay. So when you say zoning amendments, you're talking about possibly for a special town meeting, or are you talking about for spring of 2025?
I think that the things for fall would be maybe doing something about the seasonal employee housing and then the language for payment in lieu of.
Okay.
For fall.
Okay.
Oh,
And then,
come up with some more.
and then the second thing was, I believe that the Mattakese Reuse Committee is still looking for folks to volunteer. And obviously that group isn't getting off the ground until after the election and the reorganization of the select board. And I didn't watch the entire select board meeting, so I don't know if they mentioned anything about it.
I do know that Susan and Jim did put their names in,
Good.
so.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else?
I think that's good.
Anything else from any board members? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion?
Quick discussion. We didn't talk about our meetings next month.
Oh, meetings.
We got to talk about the meeting, sorry.
Guys,
Withdraw my motion.
thank you. Thank you.
As I mentioned, the June 5th meeting is the VCOD site plan review, but June 19th, I forgot that's a holiday. It's a state holiday, and Juneteenth, and town hall is closed. And then the next meeting would be July 3rd, which is the week of July 4th. And we do have that road application that we'd like to get before you guys. So I'm wondering whether you might be willing to have a June 26th meeting.
I would say I could participate remotely and probably only for about an hour. It's just the second night of overnight camp, so at 6:45 I have to turn into a pumpkin.
Yeah.
I'm good for the 26th.
So I can be there, Madam Chair, for a chunk of it.
Okay.
Till when, Will?
I can only be there till about 6:45. It's the second night of camp and
Okay.
second night of camp.
So Susan indicated she could make it. And Joanne can
yep.
make it. Jim can make it.
Maybe. Wednesday's my sailing night, but we'll see.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a...
So I'm putting Chris down as a check,
Okay.
check plus.
Well, and also Mr. Smith isn't here, so.
Yep. Yeah, I meant to send him something. But I'm also, in addition, what is people's availability for July 3rd? Were you planning on having a meeting on the 3rd?
I'm available if we need it.
Same here.
Yeah, I suppose.
So, Peter,
Possibly.
possibly? And Chris?
I won't be here.
No.
He's done.
No, you're not. You're not done until the 31st of July.
Well, let's see.
Sorry, buddy. Nice try. We're not unshackling that chain and ball, that ball and chain into.
Did write the letter.
So I guess I'm unclear. So,
July 3rd sounds okay.
well, Susan said she could, but she wouldn't be happy. Jim can do it, Joanne, Will can do it. Peter, are you a maybe?
Oh, maybe, yes, yep.
And we don't know about Mr. Smith.
Yep. And Chris can't do it, or did you think that you weren't on?
I'm not sure yet.
And if he has to, he won't be happy.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. And then, so we'll ask Ken. I'll probably send another email, maybe if we could just get a full confirmation of all of this, that would be good. Because I need to pick a day for these guys, and it's a formal public hearing, so I have to notice
You
it.
have to advertise it,
And now you're on.
yeah. Make your motion again.
Done.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.